Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really interesting time of change.
We are indeed. We're looking at the administration of Arad City and Arad County.
Right, focusing on that period of major growth and modernization, kind of mid-19th to early 20th century.
Exactly. And our main guide here is a historical account, Arad City and County Administration by Eugianos. The translation is by Gabriel Roman.
And it sounds like it gives a pretty detailed view of how things actually worked on the ground.
It really does. It gets into the nitty-gritty of these administrative bodies.
Which is crucial because this was such a dynamic time. I mean, the population figures alone are striking.
Yeah, Arad City went from about 43,000 people in 1890
43,000.
to nearly 62,000 by 1910. That's pretty rapid growth.
And the county was even bigger, right?
Oh, yeah. Over 363,000 people at the start of the 20th century. And, incredibly diverse.
That's what struck me, too. You had Hungarians, Romanians, Germans, Serbians in the city.
And then Romanians, Hungarians, Germans, Slovaks out in the county.
So how did they even manage that administratively, that mix?
Well, that's really what we want to dig into today. Understand the structures, the key people involved, the big projects.
Kind of the mission for this deep dive.
Exactly. To see how this region was shaped during that whole transformative era. So maybe let's start with Arad City itself.
Good idea. It had that unique status, didn't it? A free royal city. What did that actually mean in practice?
Okay, so being a free royal city, which it was from 1834, meant it answered directly to the government.
Ah, so bypassing the county.
Pretty much. Direct line to the Ministry of the Interior, independent of Arad County's jurisdiction, even though it sat right within it geographically.
Like an island?
Sort of, yeah.
Oh.
Its own self-governing zone covering about 112 square kilometers.
Okay, so who kept an eye on things, legally speaking? Made sure the city administration followed the rules.
That fell to the prefect. Think of them as a government commissioner.
Appointed, not elected.
Appointed by the central government, yes.
Yeah.
Their main job was verifying the legality of what the city was doing.
And we know who some of these prefects were.
We do. Between 1871 and 1919, you had people like Danny Ferenc at Salpeter, Tabaji Karoli, Count Urban Ivan. Barbas Bello was the last one on that list.
Quite a few changes over that time. What was the prefect's setup like? Big office? Lots of staff?
Surprisingly lean, actually.
And
Just the prefect and a secretary.
Really?
Yeah, their office was just a room in the town hall. Suggests a fairly focused, maybe centralized oversight role.
Okay, so the prefect is the government's check. Who is actually running the city day to day?
That would be the mayors, elected officials.
Right. And there were several notable ones during this period.
Yes, between 1867 and 1917, mayors like Atzel Peter, who was also a prefect at one point, interestingly, Veros Paul, Salasgula, Vargesilayos, they led the city's executive branch.
And I guess the mayor needed a whole team to manage everything.
Oh, absolutely. By 1910, the city admin had grown to 167 employees. And quite a few were clerks with high school education.
Yeah.
Which tells you something about the increasing need for, skilled management in running a city.
What did that structure look like under the mayor?
Well, you had a chief clerk, probably the main administrator reporting to the mayor, 2 deputy clerks supporting them, and then a whole range of specific offices.
Like what kind of departments?
Okay, so there's the police force, obviously. They had a main HQ and also a vice captain's office out in Guy.
Guy. We'll come back to that. What else?
The financial side was covered by an accounting office, the treasury, a tax department, and an excise office dealing with specific taxes on goods.
Makes sense. Infrastructure, public services.
Yep, an engineering and public health office. The city also ran an orphanage, a municipal court for smaller cases, and even handled military affairs to some extent.
It's quite a broad scope. Record keeping, other functions.
They had archives, records management, and a specific office just for managing the city's slaughterhouse.
Interesting detail.
Then the usual registry, the fire brigade, and a justice department. It really shows you all the different facets of managing a growing city back then.
You mentioned that police vice captain's office in Guy, issuing birth certificates. Even though Guy wasn't an official place name, what's that about?
Yeah, isn't that curious? It kind of hints that maybe local administrative practice didn't always perfectly match the official books.
So Guy was maybe just a local neighborhood name everyone knew?
Possibly, yeah. And the police station there just became the practical place for people in that area to get official documents like birth certificates. It suggests this interesting interplay between the formal structure and, how things actually worked for people living there.
Fascinating. Okay, so that covers the mayor and the executive side. What about making the big decisions, the laws, the policies?
That was the legislative committee, and its makeup was, well, it was real bland.
How so?
Half the members were elected, representing different parts of the city, different constituencies,
Okay, democratic element there.
but the other half,
Yep.
that was made up of the virals.
Yeah.
Virals.
Yeah, basically the highest taxpayers. In 1904, there were 71 of them. Plus, you had 19 officials who got a vote just by virtue of their position.
So money and position gave you a direct say alongside the elected reps.
Exactly. It wasn't purely based on votes. This virile system was common in the Austro-Hungarian setup. The idea was those with the biggest financial stake should have a direct voice.
Though you could argue about how balanced that representation really was.
Absolutely. It raises those kinds of questions. But this committee, this mix, they were the ones making the really major calls that shaped modern Arad.
And they oversaw a period of massive development, didn't they?
Incredible development, really, over about 4 decades. They approved public transport, setting up a brick factory essential for building and the huge projects for a new theater and that new town hall.
Those are significant civic buildings. What else was on their agenda?
They okayed building a dam on the Mears tributary, creating 2 big public parks, funding lots of schools.
So infrastructure, green space, education, definitely. Plus symbolic stuff, the Statue of Liberty, a statue of Kossuth. They pushed for the big iron bridges, the Karelia Train and Erzsébet Disciple bridges.
Vital connections.
Absolutely. And introducing a bus service, building the Cultural Palace, the Arad Podgoria railway line.
Our list keeps going.
It does. They organized the big 1890 exhibition, developed the water supply and sewage system crucial for public health, started asphalting roads, switched the city to electric lighting, even built a summer theater.
It's an astonishing amount of modernization in a relatively short time.
It really paints a picture of a city leadership actively pushing for progress.
Now, the city was divided into districts. You mentioned 7. Center, Sarkat, Elizabethan.
New District, or Ushtalep, Poltura, Iga, and Guy.
Did these districts have their own councils or anything? Local power?
Not really. They seem to have been more for organizational convenience. They didn't have autonomy or their own headquarters, except for that police vice district in Guy we talked about, which again sort of highlights a specific localized function popping up within the bigger structure.
Let's talk more about that new town hall. That sounds like a cornerstone project.
It really was. The decision was made before 1870, build a new town hall and a new theater, financed with a big loan.
Ambitious.
Very. Although, interestingly, because of budget issues, some money meant for the town hall actually got shifted over to the theater first.
Priorities.
Seems like it. The initial design was by a famous Budapest architect, Lechner Uden, but it had to be modified by a local Arad architect, Pikar Ferenc, to fit the reduced budget.
So the final building wasn't quite the original grand vision.
Some elements got cut back, yeah. Like a huge staircase, apparently, and they didn't build a full second floor across the whole thing.
It's still impressive.
Oh, definitely. It was still a monumental building. That tower, 54 meters high, supposedly inspired by Dutch town halls. It was a real statement of civic pride.
And the administration moved in.
Most offices moved over in 1876. They actually demolished the tower of the old town hall soon after because it wasn't safe.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Literally. And the Legislative Committee held its first meeting in the new building in January 1877. A symbolic moment.
You can almost picture it. And it sounds like they weren't shy about documenting their work.
Not at all. They actually published these big, detailed volumes in 1904 and 1914.
What was in them?
Everything. The committee's activities, decisions, lists of members, even photos and biographical info. They offer an amazing window for historians today.
Transparency, or maybe just record keeping for posterity?
Probably a bit of both.
Okay, so city admin, legislative committee. What about the courts? Were they separate?
Yes, Arad had its own independent judicial system, the Royal Court of Justice.
Another impressive building.
Apparently so. Finished in 1892, located near the Mears Dam. By 1914, it had a pretty substantial staff. Well, a president, Dr. Fabian Lajos, 3 Court of Appeal judges, 16 regular judges, clerks, trainees, even official interpreters for Romanian and German.
Reflecting the multilingual reality again.
Exactly, and a land registrar, too. So a fully functioning separate judicial branch for the city.
Right, so the Free Royal City was quite a self-contained unit. How did things work in the wider Arad County then?
Okay, shifting focus to the county. Its role was different. It was that intermediate level.
Between the central government and
the local districts, the place. This was the standard setup in Hungary and Transylvania at the time, roughly 1880 to 1919. There were 63 counties like Arad, plus others in Slavonia.
And Arad County was physically large.
Very. 6,331 square kilometers. And just like in the city, the government appointed a county prefect to oversee things.
Keeping that central control link.
Precisely.
And the county's population. Also diverse, but maybe a different mix than the city.
Yes, exactly. We mentioned over 363,000 people total at the start of the 20th century.
The largest group being?
Romanians. Around 212,000. Then about 72,000 Hungarians, 34,500 Germans, and around 5,300 Slovaks.
Managing that diversity across such a big area must have been a challenge.
No doubt about it. Different languages, different needs, spread out geographically.
So what about the county's legislative body? Did it mirror the city's committee?
Similar name, the County Legislative Committee. It met initially in the old Prefecture Palace.
The one built back in 1821.
That's the one. A classicist building, but it also apparently included a prism and courtyard, a reminder of state power.
Grim thought. But they moved later.
Yes. As things grew, they built a twin building next door on the main boulevard around 1870-71 that had more offices and a big meeting room just for the committee.
And the committee itself, larger than the city's.
Much larger, 578 members.
Wow. Same structure. Elected
And the virals, yes.
Yeah.
Still that 50-50 split between elected reps from the districts and the county's highest taxpayers.
That principle really carried through. What kind of work did this big county committee actually do? Did they break into smaller groups?
They did. A lot of the detailed work happened in specific commissions. There was an administration committee, one for public education, statistics, health, and public hospitals.
Covering key areas of county responsibility.
Right. And also, interestingly, a censorship committee.
Censorship tells you something about the times.
It does. Then there was a central council and a jury board. Different chairs for those the elected sub-prefect usually led the central board, but the government-appointed prefect chaired the jury board.
Interesting division of roles there. Who were the main paid officials running the county machine day to day?
You had the deputy county prefect, second in command, various clerks, naturally, a chief accountant, chief treasurer, chief inspector for financial oversight.
Standard administrative roles.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
A registrar, an archivist, 2 prosecutors, the chief medical officer for the county, senior accountants, and a castellan.
Castellan, what's that?
Basically the property manager. Looked after the county's buildings and logistics.
And we know who some of these key figures were around, say, 1914.
We do. The source tells us the prefect then was Baron Urban Ivan of Monioro. Chief secretary was Dr. Turuk Ferenc. Deputy prefect, Tolnoki Nagilagos.
Helps put faces to the titles.
Exactly. And people like Chief Notary Shil Yosef, Chief Prosecutor Dr. Karestis Gula, County Chief Medical Officer Borsos Bella. These were the people steering the ship.
And the county didn't just operate out of those main buildings in Arad City.
No, the prefecture owned property beyond the 2 palaces and gardens in Arad. They had various rural buildings out in places like Pisica, Iria, Pankota, reflecting that their reach extended across the whole county territory.
Makes sense. The county itself was divided up, you said, into 10 districts, please.
10 of them, yes. Arad, Pisica, Iria, Tarnova, Mariadna, Halmaju, Sabia, Inel, Chainu Kriai, and Elik.
And you mentioned borders shifted later.
Yeah, after the union of Transylvania with Romania, there were adjustments. Most of the Elik district ended up in Hungary, but some parts, like Târnu and Adlac, became part of Arad County in Romania. Shows how political changes redraw administrative maps.
And justice wasn't just centralized in Arad City for the county.
No, the county also had 8 independent zonal courts spread out in different towns, bringing the justice system closer to the people in the districts.
Okay, drilling down even further. Within the local villages, the communes, who was the key admin person there?
That would be the notary, a really crucial figure.
How so?
They were paid civil servants, responsible for issuing all sorts of official documents. This role was seen as vital right back to the 18th century. People often saw the notary as the village father.
The go-to person.
Exactly. Guidance, issuing orders, mediating disputes sometimes. Often, the person elected as head of the village was also the notary, combining local leadership and official administration.
A very central role. And even out in these villages, technology was arriving. Communications.
Definitely. It's quite impressive, actually. By the late 19th century, apparently every village in Arad County had a post office, and those post offices had telegraphs.
Every village. That's significant connectivity for the time.
It really is. And then, From 1896, they started rolling out a county telephone network. Cleverly, they used the existing telegraph poles for the phone lines.
Resourceful.
Shows a real push to modernize communication infrastructure across the board.
It's fascinating, this layering. From the village notary right up through the district, the county offices, the prefect, linking back to the central government.
A complex system trying to manage a large, diverse region.
And the source material, you said, even gives us names, not just the top officials.
Yeah, which is fantastic. It lists elected city officials. It lists those virals, the top taxpayers, often with their job and how much tax they paid. Some names even pop up twice. Maybe they qualified in two categories.
And what kinds of people were these virals? Yeah.
A real mix reflecting the city's economy. You see traders, industrialists, the people driving modernization, big landowners, lawyers, doctors. The tax amounts vary quite a bit, too, showing the economic layers within that elite group.
And the elected officials.
Also from a range of backgrounds, representing different segments of society. It gives you a much more textured feel for who was involved.
It really does paint a vivid picture. A complex administrative machine operating in Arad City and the wider county during this intense period of change.
Absolutely. You can see the challenges. Managing that explosive urban growth in the city, overseeing a huge, diverse rural county, all within the framework of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was a massive task.
So thinking about all the structures they set up, the huge number of public projects they actually managed to achieve, it really makes you wonder, what do you think were the biggest hurdles those leaders faced back then, trying to modernize Arad City and County?
That's a great question. Funding, maybe?
Hmm.
Balancing the needs of different ethnic groups?
Yeah.
Just the sheer logistics?
Yeah, and maybe thinking about today, are there parallels? When you look at rapidly developing regions around the world now, do they face similar administrative challenges, even if the context is different?
It definitely gives you something to think about. The fundamental challenges of governance, development, and diversity. They often echo across time, don't they?
They certainly do. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Arad's administrative past.